Jesus Christ Superstar is a rock opera musical created in 1970, with music by Andrew Lloyd Webber and lyrics by Tim Rice. The musical received a film adaptation in 1973, probably its most well-known version. But after all, what does this story teach us about Jesus and his more human side? The plot of JCS follows what we know as the Passion of Christ, that is, the last moments of Jesus' life. We see the Last Supper, Judas' betrayal, the capture of Christ, and finally, his crucifixion. Although the language used in the work is not the same as the scriptures, the main facts remain. The difference lies in how the musical simplifies these events and presents them in a way accessible even to those who have no faith or religious ties, allowing the audience to sympathize with the suffering of Jesus. This happens because Jesus Christ Superstar shows a deeply human Messiah, capable of feeling fear, insecurity, anger, and despair. And it is precisely this human dimension that makes his sacrifice all the more impactful. The first act begins with "Heaven on Their Minds," sung by Judas Iscariot. Judas is seen, most of the time, only as an evil man. He betrayed Jesus, and was one of the main ones responsible for his death. However, here we can better understand his motivations. Judas believed that Jesus was a wise man and that his teachings would be capable of changing the reality of the people. On the other hand, Judas did not believe in the holiness of Christ. He thought that the other followers of Jesus were blinded by the promise of a paradise after life, and that the belief in a Messiah sent by God was the result of a delusion caused by the cult of personality they were engaging in. In other words, Judas thought that the figure of Jesus was becoming more important than his message. He saw the growing fame of Jesus as a threat to his people, who felt more and more confident in challenging Rome. Judas was sure that they would be annihilated if that commotion continued growing. In the song, Judas recalls, "I remember when this whole thing began. No talk of God then, we called you a man. And believe me, my admiration for you hasn't died." This part of the song demonstrates very well Judas's feelings towards Jesus. He loved him and admired him as a leader, but he truly thought that he was letting himself be carried away by the euphoria of the crowd. Soon after, we see Jesus in a moment of exhaustion. While he tries to rest, the disciples pressure him to act, to move forward and go to Jerusalem. He responds, irritated, "Why are you so obsessed with fighting?" This discomfort is reinforced by the scene in which Mary Magdalene tries to calm him, washing his hair. Judas, in turn, criticizes this closeness, considering it inappropriate and believing it would harm his reputation. Throughout Christian tradition, due to mistranslations and mistaken interpretations, the idea that she was a prostitute became consolidated, which does not correspond to the original biblical text. In fact, Mary Magdalene was a close disciple of Jesus, a woman of means who helped support his mission. Still, the aura of sinner attributed to her became the dominant narrative. And in the musical, Judas uses precisely this stigma to attack her connection with Jesus. Christ's response is immediate. Who are you to criticize her? Who are you to despise her? Jesus is sad. He feels that his followers have not fully absorbed the lessons he tried to teach. Judas points fingers, believing that his personal judgment is above Christ's compassion and seeing himself as more deserving of mercy, since he was condemning the presence of Magdalene among the disciples. At the same time, he notices that his other followers are no different, since the reason they want to go to Jerusalem is to grow in size, in search of power. Above all, he is pessimistic. This is another side of Christ that we are not so used to. He feels his hope diminish. In the second act, we have Last Supper. Jesus already knows that he will die, and he knows that two friends will turn their backs on him. Judas will betray him and Peter will deny him. After the supper, we have one of the most important moments of the whole musical, which is the song Gethsemane, I Only Want to Say. This is a confrontation between Jesus and the Lord, his Father. Jesus questions the reason for his death. He knows that there is a divine plan and that he is part of this plan. However, as he approaches his imminent fate, he asks God why his death is so necessary. Here, he says that he is no longer the same as when he began his mission years before, singing, "Then, I was inspired. Now, I'm sad and tired." This song dismantles the vision of a Christ shielded against fear. Despite his holy nature, Jesus was not spared from human pains. Just like any person, he was terrified about the future and the idea of dying. He never stopped trusting God, but his disappointment with the world weakened his determination. If at the beginning he was certain that his sacrifice would have a bigger meaning, Now he asks himself if it will all be in vain. This part of JCS shows in a didactic way how much Jesus felt alone. He felt that his followers were with him for the wrong reasons, and that they had not truly understood what he tried to teach. Even those who were closest to him abandoned him. Now, what remained was his own Father, who was condemning him to death. Jesus accepts his destiny, but gives God an ultimatum: kill me now, before I change my mind. This is the portrait of a reluctant Christ, frightened and resistant to facing his trials, but above all, human. After Jesus' capture, we witness Judas's death. Judas feels the weight of his betrayal when he sees Jesus suffering in his imprisonment. It is worth noting that his feeling of guilt resides in the respect and love he had for Jesus regardless of his holiness. That is, Judas still thinks of Jesus as a man equal to all. He sings, crying, "He is a man. He is not a king. He is just the same as everyone, I know." This shows that Judas's regret is not about fear of God's judgment. He thought he was doing the right thing by giving his friend away to the authorities, imagining that if Jesus remained free and gathering more followers, them all would be massacred by Rome. When facing Jesus mistreated by his captors, though, the reality of what he had done fell upon Judas. He couldn't bear the weight of being a traitor and ends his own life. It is curious how this only reinforces Judas's lack of faith. Peter also sinned by denying Christ. However, Peter believed in the holiness of Jesus, and he knew that his genuine repentance would be forgiven. Judas, on the other hand, although truly repentant, did not believe he would be forgiven, precisely because he did not believe that Jesus Christ was the Messiah. Jesus Christ Superstar is not just a retelling of the Passion of Christ, it is a bold portrait of how Jesus and even Judas were, above all, human. And perhaps that is precisely why this musical remains so impactful. It reminds us that even the greatest stories of faith only make sense when connected to our own humanity.